Let's talk about how we can go about improving the conversion rate on your website by fixing your forms. Because forms provide amazing opportunities for just boosting your conversion rate. My name's Paul Boag, and a big part of the work I do is around conversion rate optimization on websites, and forms are always my go-to. And I'm not alone in that. 50% of marketers agree that web forms are one of the highest converting lead generation tools. They're absolutely essential to our success, and fixing your form can make a huge difference. In particular, because the people that have got as far as filling in the form on your website are the people most likely to convert and so are most valuable to your organization. And there is a lot of potential here as well, because something like 44% of users who start filling out a form will fail to complete it. And those are all potential leads that could help your business if you make it easier for them to complete that form. So let's look at a few tips that will help you do just that. The most obvious one is to reduce the number of fields that your form has. And you might consider that you've already done that, but users may have a very different perspective, and it's their perspective that matters. You see, 27% of people will abandon a form that they consider too long. You might not consider it too long, but if they do, they will abandon it. On top of that, 10% will abandon a form that they believe is asking irrelevant questions. And from a user's perspective, we are often asking for questions that are irrelevant. They're relevant to us, but they're not relevant to the user completing the task. When a user is filling in a form, whether it be to make a purchase or to contact an organization, they understand that certain information is required. Their name, for example, or their card details if it's a transaction, or their email address if you want to contact them, or they want you to contact them, or their postal address if you're going to deliver something to them. That all makes sense to them. That's a part of the transaction that they're making. However, there's a lot of additional information that we like as marketers that just alienates and annoys users. Things like asking for excessive personal information, or asking, how did you find us today? These are kinds of things that the user doesn't care about and provides no benefit to them. It's to help you and not the user. And then asking for things like marketing consent or confirmation of legal statements. All of these things are unnecessary from the user's perspective. Now, I know you don't want to remove all of these fields, but you can handle them in slightly different ways. So for example, there's no reason why a user needs to check a box saying, I agree to the legal statement. The legal statement can just be, by submitting this form, you are agreeing to the legal statement. And equally with things like marketing consent and referral sources, or even personal information, my advice is if you want to capture that kind of information, do it on the thank you page. You know, that useless page that appears after someone's completed their transaction that does nothing more than confirm that it's gone through. Well, that's an opportunity for you to follow up with additional questions, because in the user's mind, they've completed their task and now we're open to the next thing. And you can introduce that next thing without alienating them or annoying them. And of course, the other great thing is you've collected that data up to that point. So it's safe. You've got all of the information to fulfill that user's basic needs. And now you're adding additional things on top. Essentially, what I'm talking about doing is breaking your forms down into stages. And those stages can be captured as you go along. And that provides huge advantages, not just in terms of required information and nice to have information, but you can break your form down even further if you want. And by doing so, users are going to be less overwhelmed, especially with longer forms. If you break them down into stages, it feels like a lot less to commit to. Also, once a user has started completing a form, they're more likely to continue to do so if that form is broken into stages. But second, as I said, you can capture as you go. So let's say, for example, your first stage of a form just asks for somebody's name and their email address. And then the second stage asks for marketing consent, for example. And if you do that and they get to the second stage and they drop out, then you've still got their name and email address to be able to follow up on them and encourage them to keep going, encourage them to complete the form. You're not losing that potential lead. And of course, this also helps you identify where there are problem fields, because you can see that, oh, users have reached that second stage with the marketing consent, and that's when they've dropped out. They obviously have a problem with marketing consent. But it's not just about how you present the information, reducing the amount of information that you're presenting at any one time. It's also being forgiving about how that information is gathered. A lot of the time we require users to format their information in very specific ways. Phone numbers are a great example of this. Sometimes there's got to be a country code, sometimes there hasn't. Sometimes there has to be dashes between the area code and their local number. All kinds of different formatting requirements. Zip codes and postcodes are the same, especially here in the UK, where sometimes they have a space halfway through the postcode. Sometimes it has to be uppercase, sometimes it has to be lowercase. It's a right old mess. And then, of course, there's the dreaded password requirements, where users have to use punctuation and special characters and capitals and all of those kinds of things. All of these things are just putting barriers in the way of the user completing the task. And a lot of the time, these problems are built into forms for one simple reason, because it makes things easier for you, right? So we shouldn't be making our problem the problem of users. So it's easy for us to ask users to format content in a particular way so it's nice and clean in our CRM than it is for us to process that information before it's sent to the CRM. But equally, there are other examples of this. CAPTCHA is a great example of this. We hate spam. We don't want to get spam. It's really annoying when you get people filling in your form with spam. So what do? We shove CAPTCHA on the site and make the user deal with the problem by having to identify traffic lights. Well, with a little bit of extra work, that could be done behind the scenes, and you wouldn't need the user to complete a CAPTCHA, and you wouldn't need to deal with spam. It's just that you have to put that extra work in. So not only do we need to make the extra effort to make it easy for people to fill in these forms, we also need to think about how they're filling in those forms and the effort involved, especially on mobile. Filling in forms on a mobile device is a right pain in the neck. And so anything you can do to make that easier will improve your conversion rate. So some examples would be to allow things like Apple Pay and Google Pay, which avoids the user having to enter any credit card details. Looking up addresses based on a postcode and a house number is another excellent way of improving your conversion rate, because it reduces the amount of fields the user needs to fill in. And also making sure that your form works with the autocomplete and autofill features built into most browsers, where at a press of a button, it'll automatically fill in their name, address, email, etc. By reducing the data entry burden on users, you will see a conversion rate improvement. But don't take my word for any of this. These are superb opportunities to do some testing and to evaluate yourself, evaluate what happens, how much your conversion rate improves if you remove that marketing consent field or you push it back to the thank you page. You can test data entry requirements, and if you change the formatting that's required for a particular thing, does that improve conversion rate? What happens if you remove unnecessary fields, etc.? Test for yourself and see just what a big difference making improvements to your form can make to your conversion rate.